Hello everybody and welcome to this Imperial Assault gameplay video. Today we're going to be playing Skirmish, but not just regular Skirmish, we're playing 4-player Skirmish. A few weeks ago we had a 4-player team Skirmish tournament with some special rules, and I got to record some of the games for you. I've decided to show this game because I want to give all of you the best first impression of this format, and in my opinion the Jabba's Realm 4-player map, when played correctly, is the best, least broken 4-player Skirmish map available at the moment. So normally players are supposed to sit across from their teammates, but everyone found this to be really awkward and preferred to sit next to their teammate, so instead just altered activations as if they were sitting next to their opponents. For this tournament we had some special rules that a team's combined lists had to be the same faction and could not contain any duplicates of unique deployment cards, and also that players could not play command cards onto their teammates' figures, but that they could target friendly figures with command cards that do so, such as Inspiring Speech and Call the Vanguard. This meant that players couldn't double up on the most powerful figures in the game and actually had to plan their list together ahead of time. So on the left side we have Zachary on the top left and Todd on the bottom left playing Mercenaries. Zach has IG-88 with Focused on the Kill, a Bantha Rider, Onar Koma, Beast Tamer, an Elite Jawa, BT-1, and Chopper. His teammate, Todd, is playing Shyla, Maul, Vinto, Elite Weequay Pirates, Jabba, Temporary Alliance, and the Lando Calrissian. On the right side, we have Tom on the top right and Matt on the bottom right. Tom is running IG-88 with Focused on the Kill, Shyla, Vinto, Elite Jawa, BT-1 with Scavenged Weaponry attached, R2-D2, and C-3PO. His teammate Matt is running Onar, Hondo, Jabba, regular hired guns, Elite Jawa, Temporary Alliance, Sabine, Hera, Doubt, Black Market, and Extra Armor. Even though both teams are playing Mercenaries and have a few duplicate figures, there's still quite a bit of variety between each player's list. Each player decides to just claim the deployment zone that is in front of them for the sake of convenience, and Matt moves all of his figures one space with Hera's Smooth Landing, and distribute power tokens from Extra Armor to his and Tom's figures. Since I don't want this to be a 2-hour video, I'm going to be editing out all of the downtime and table sound from here on, and be describing each play in detail for you. Because both teams kept forgetting to keep track of Jabba the Hutt's nefarious gains in the first few rounds and then tried to apply it retroactively at the end, I'm going to be keeping track of the score as the players were recording it, and then next to that I'll keep track of what the score should look like with the forgotten nefarious gains triggers added in. Todd has initiative and activates first. He moves his first Weequay 6 spaces to the closest turret, and his other Weequay moves 4 spaces onto the terminal and uses Prowl to become hidden. Going in player order based on where the players should be sitting, Tom activates next and activates R2-D2, who moves 3 spaces next to the terminal and then draws a command card with Scomp Link. Zach then responds by activating Chopper, who moves 4 spaces up to his terminal and uses System Shock to deal 2 damage and 1 strain to R2-D2. Tom decides to take the strain on R2-D2 as damage. Matt's Jabba focuses his Onar and draws a command card. Todd has less activations than Matt, so he decides to pass his activation. Tom has C-3PO focus Vinto and then move 3 spaces towards Matt's deployment and the center of the map. Since Zach also has 5 activations to Matt's current 6 activations, he also decides to pass. Matt activates his Jawa, moving 5 spaces towards the nearest turret. Todd moves Shyla 8 spaces to be adjacent to the outpost closest to Zach's deployment zone. Tom mirrors Todd by moving his own Shyla 8 spaces next to the outpost closest to his teammate Matt's deployment zone. Zach moves his Jawa 4 spaces into the hallway between him and Todd, and then plays Planning, although he did not have enough movement points to quite be adjacent to the turret in that hallway. Matt moves his hired gun 4 spaces and opens the door leading to Todd's deployment zone, Note that he cannot normally open the door from that space, but he could have also just moved 4 spaces and then spent his last movement point to move into that space after opening the door. The second hired gun moves 10 spaces to join Tom Shyla in controlling the outpost between their deployment zones. Todd activates his Jabba to focus Zach's Onar and then draws a card. Tom then moves his Jawa 7 spaces to be adjacent to the turret that's between his deployment zone and Zach's deployment zone. Matt moves Hera up 4 spaces to attack the weak way that's standing on the turret in the hallway from behind the blocking terrain wall and deals 2 damage to it. Todd moves Lando 8 spaces to be adjacent to one of the turrets in the middle of the map. Tom moves BT 4 spaces and takes a range 9 attack at Shyla, but only rolls 5 accuracy and misses. Zach exhausts Beast Tamer to give the Bantha a free move. He then moves 8 spaces and opens the door leading to Tom's deployment zone. He spends the last 2 movement points to move towards the center of the map. Matt moves Sabine 3 spaces and takes a shot at the same weak way in the hallway, dealing 4 damage and defeating it. Matt's team scores 4 points for the defeated weak way. Todd moves Maul 6 spaces to replace the defeated weak way adjacent to the turret between him and Matt. Tom moves Vinto 6 spaces to be between BT and his Jawa. Also, Tom is not impressed by Maul's driven by hatred ability.
It's not that good. Hey.
Zach moves Onar 8 spaces into the hallway leading to Tom's deployment zone. Matt continues to pour fire into the hallway leading to Todd's deployment zone. He moves Onar 2 spaces and makes a focused attack against Maul, and then he uses Assassinate to add an additional 3 damage, and ends up dealing 10 damage to Maul in total. He then finishes Onar's movement, moving 2 spaces towards the center of the map. Todd moves Vinto 10 spaces to control all 4 turrets in the center of the map. Tom activates IG-88, gaining 2 movement points from focus on the kill. He then moves 5 into the center of the map and uses Hit and Run to attack Vinto, gaining 3 movement points from the attack. He chooses to roll a blue and a red die in addition to his focus and ends up getting range and deals 4 damage to Vinto. He then uses the 3 movement points from Hit and Run to move behind the cover of the blocking terrain pieces. Then Zach activates his IG-88. He moves 7 spaces using focus on the kill and makes a range 4 attack on Tom's Jawa. He uses a red and a green die for his attack pool and ends up one-shotting the Jawa, dealing 5 damage to it, and Zach scores 3 points for his team. Zach then plays Opportunity to move Onar 3 spaces to be adjacent to Tom's Vinto, and Todd also forgets to gain another victory point with his own Jabba's nefarious gains. Matt aborts their plan of trying to kill Vinto with Hondo, deciding the range 6 shot is too long, and moves 5 spaces to take a range 3 attack on Maul. Since Maul only has 2 health left, Zach and Todd decide not to spend the victory points on Hondo's shot, and Hondo deals the needed damage to kill Maul, gaining them 7 victory points. Matt again forgets to use Nefarious Gains to gain an extra victory point from the kill, but he does use Celebration to gain an extra 4 victory points. Moving into the end phase of round 1, each team scores 2 victory points for the single outpost they control as a team. Then each player gets to draw an extra command card for each terminal their team controls. So Zach and Todd each get to draw 2 extra command cards since they each control a terminal. And Matt and Tom each get to draw 1 extra command card as Tom controls 1 terminal. Both teams then move to resolve their turrets at the start of the round. Unfortunately, they misread the rules and misunderstand how it works. The way it's supposed to work is that for each turret a team controls, they get to choose that many spaces, then they roll a single green die, and whatever the results are, you apply that damage to each figure on the chosen spaces. What they ended up doing was rolling a green die each time for each turret they controlled, and they kept choosing the same figure. So instead, what should have happened is they should have chosen Zach and Todd should have chosen basically five figures, rolled a single green die, and applied that damage to those five figures. What they ended up doing is choosing IG 5 times and rolling 5 green dice and doing 6 damage to Tom and Matt's IG-88. Tom and Matt rolled 1 die for controlling their single turret and did 2 damage to Zach and Todd's IG-88. I think this is a mistake that a lot of players make when they first read this mission, so it's not a huge deal here, but sometimes it can make a big swing if you can do like 6 or 8 damage on the beginning of a round to a figure without even attacking it. So good to keep in mind if you ever do play the mission. At the start of the round, Zach plays Overdrive to give his droid some extra actions, and Matt then plays Take Initiative to take the first activation for the round, which means that Matt will activate first, and then Tom, who has initiative, and then Zach will get to activate, and then the turn order will go back to normal after that. Unfortunately, Matt and Tom realized that they forgot they could have used Doubt to remove a focus token from Onar. Matt moves Sabine 4 spaces towards the middle of the map. She uses Parting Gift, targeting the space adjacent to Lando and Vinto, and rolls 2 damage, and then performs an attack against Lando, dealing 3 damage to him, leaving Lando with 5 damage and Vinto with 6, and then reveals Rebel Graffiti from his hand to gain 2 victory points. Tom activates Vinto, moving him 1 space to make a range 5 attack against IG-88. First attack is focused and deals 3 damage and bleed and weaken to IG-88. The second attack deals 2 damage to IG-88 thanks to heightened reflexes, although Tom doesn't notice that he doesn't have enough range on the second attack, but they let the damage go through anyway. And then Vinto moves back 4 spaces into his deployment zone behind the blocking terrain. Vinto also deals 2 damage to Onar using his Bolt Slinger ability. Zach's IG-88 now has 7 damage on him and is bleeding and weakened. Matt also realizes that he should have exhausted a figure for Take Initiative, so he exhausts his Jawa. Zach activates IG-88 using his first action to remove the bleed condition. He then moves 4 spaces and attacks BT at range 2 using 2 red dice, taking 2 damage for Overdrive. Tom discards his top command card off screen for Relentless and spends a block power token from extra armor against the attack. Both teams forget to remove IG-88's Surge for Weaken and mistakenly have BT suffer 5 damage. Zach decides to take another 2 damage on IG, going up to 11 damage to attack again with Overdrive. Again, Tom mills a card for Relentless and spends a block power token on the attack. Zach uses Officer's Training to reroll the red die with 1 damage, but Tom removes it with Tough Luck. Again, they forget to remove the Surge for Weaken, and BT suffers 3 damage, going down to just 2 health remaining thanks to the 2 block power tokens from extra armor. Zach decides not to go for another attack, and IG spends its remaining 3 movement points to retreat but stay adjacent to the turret. Matt then gets to activate a normal turn order. He moves a hired gun 5 spaces and makes a range 5 attack against Vinto. He uses Hera's Called Shot to get the accuracy he needs to finish off Vinto, gaining 5 victory points, again forgetting to use Jabba's Nefarious Gains ability. He then moves the other hired gun 5 spaces to make a range 2 attack against Lando. He rolls extremely well again and is threatening Lando's 3 health with a lethal attack. Todd uses Lando's resourceful ability to reroll the defense die, replacing it with a white die using Gambit. The white die seemingly comes up short, but Lando uses his unique card Cheat to Win to change the result to a dodge and survive the attack. Todd activates Lando, who moves 3 spaces, spending an extra movement point to move into the difficult terrain adjacent to Tom's IG-88. Tom attempts to play Run for Cover when Lando attacks IG, but quickly realizes that IG isn't a smuggler, thank God, and instead remembers to play Dirty Trick when Lando entered an adjacent space. Todd decides to suffer strain instead of becoming stunned, and Lando takes 2 damage and Todd mills a card from his deck off camera. Lando attacks Tom's IG and rolls well enough to stun him, and Todd and Zach decide that potentially losing the stun isn't worth re-rolling an attack die. IG-88 also suffers 1 damage from the attack, and Lando becomes hidden. I want to just take a short pause here to allow the players to issue a warning about the most powerful Force user in the game.
There's that guy Davith has like stuff where he goes invisible.
Really?
Yeah, it's so annoying.
It is.
Noah uses it all the time. Super annoying. He can move like 12 spaces on like a single move and then go hit it. So you can come over here, do something, go hit it in front of you.
And they can't.
You literally cannot shoot at him.
Yes, you will all come to fear Davith Elso as Matt and Tom have. Moving on, Tom activates BT, moving him 2 spaces and attacking Zach's IG-88. Tom exhausts Scavenge Weaponry to add a damage, and Zach uses Onar's Get Down ability to add a block, resulting in 1 damage dealt to IG and 1 damage to Onar via Blast. BT then moves 2 spaces away from IG and Onar. Zach activates Onar using Rush to move him 3 spaces and dealing a damage to himself and to BT. He then attacks the 1 health BT and defeats him. Zach's team earns 6 victory points, and Zach plays Celebration to earn 4 more. Zach also remembers to discard Onar's Focus. Unfortunately, they forget to use Nefarious Gains. Matt moves Hondo 5 spaces to be adjacent to Todd's terminal and Todd's last weak way to account for its hidden condition and attacks it. Todd and Zach decide they can't afford to fall further behind on points to negotiate and decide to give Hondo the +2 damage. This gives Hondo the exact 6 damage he needs to defeat the weak way, earning Matt's team 4 points. They do not use Nefarious Gains. Todd's Shyla uses Responsive to move 1 space and then uses Mandalorian Whip to pull Matt's hired gun away from the turrets. Matt rolls a dodge against the attack, which gets removed by the hired gun's disposable ability, but Matt decides to play On the Lamb to save the little guy, moving him away from Shyla and adjacent to all 4 turrets in the center. Shyla then moves 4 spaces and ends her movement without being adjacent to anything. Tom activates his Shyla and moves her 5 spaces back towards his terminal. He uses Mandalorian Whip to push Onar into a space which blocks Zach's IG's line of sight, but then moves Onar back instead. Onar suffers 6 damage from Shyla's attack. Zach exhausts Beast Tamer and takes 2 move actions to move the Bantha Rider 13 spaces to control 2 turret tokens and trample over Tom's IG-88 for 1 damage, leaving IG-88 at 7 health. Matt activates Hera, moving her 4 spaces and attacking the Bantha Rider for 5 damage, leaving it at 16. Todd has Jabba use Order Hit, spending 2 victory points to allow Zach's Onar to perform an attack against Tom's 5 health Vinto, defeating him and earning 5 victory points back, despite Matt depleting Doubt to force Onar to re-roll the red die. Todd also remembers to gain the 1 victory point. Tom activates his IG-88 and decides to make like a tree and get out of there. He removes the stun bequeathed by Lando and moves 7 spaces into Matt's terminal room, adjacent to the terminal. Zach activates his BT, spending 2 actions to move it 8 spaces adjacent to Tom's Shyla. He is then able to suffer 2 damage on BT to perform an additional action thanks to Overdrive, and attacks Shyla, dealing her 7 damage and leaving her with 5 health remaining. Matt uses Rush with Onar to deal the last point of damage to Lando, defeating him. Matt forgets to use Nefarious Gains here and scores 6 victory points. Onar then attacks the Bantha Rider, adding a damage with Hera's Called Shot for a total of 8 damage, leaving the Bantha with 9 health. Tom's R2 draws a card from the terminal with Scomplink and recovers 1 of the damage dealt by Chopper with Service. Zach's Jawa moves 8 spaces to be adjacent to an uncontested outpost. Then Matt spends 2 victory points to use Order Hit with Jabba, performing an attack against the Bantha Rider with Onar, dealing 5 damage and leaving it at 4 health. Onar uses 1 of his 2 movement points available, and Matt seems to not notice the green outpost that is 1 space away from him. Zach's Chopper uses System Shock to zap Tom's IG-88, who is left standing next to a terminal. Finally, Tom's 3PO moves 3 spaces and focuses Shyla with Inform. At the end of round 2, both teams scored 2 points from the single outpost they each control. Zach and Todd each draw 2 command cards for the terminal that Chopper controls, while Matt and Tom each get to draw 4 command cards since they collectively control 3 terminals. Todd plays Ferocity at the end of the round to have Zach's Bantha Rider attack Shyla, dealing 4 damage and leaving her at 1 health. I should note here that because of how Ferocity is worded, you can't actually use the card on a friendly player's creature, even without our special command card rules. The player that plays Ferocity has to choose either their own creature or a creature on the opponent's team, but can't choose a creature that isn't theirs even if it's friendly. But Zach and Todd did approach me before the event to ask about this interaction, and I mistakenly told them it would work because I didn't read the card carefully, so this one is completely my bad. Sorry guys. Zach then follows up with his own Jundland Terror card, moving the Bantha 2 spaces and trampling Shyla to defeat her, gaining 8 victory points, but again forgetting to use Jabba's Nefarious Gains. The Bantha Rider then attacks R2-D2, dealing 3 damage and leaving R2 with 1 health. Initiative then passes from Tom to Zach. At the start of the round, the players trigger the turrets, and again, unfortunately, we have some rules mistakes made. And again, this just comes down to the 4-player format being very new to everyone. So let's talk about the turrets first. This time, Zach and Todd only control a single turret, so they inadvertently do this correctly, dealing 2 damage to Tom's IG, putting him at a total of 12 damage. Then things get nuts. Matt and Tom now control 5 turrets since Zach moved the Bantha away with Jundland Terror. Now, what you're supposed to do is choose a number of spaces equal to your team's turrets, then you roll a die. What the players have come up with is that they get to choose a space, then roll a die, then choose a space, then roll a die, then choose a space, etc. Again, this all just chalks up to inexperience with the format and the mission. Anyway, doing things this way allows Matt and Tom to kill the 3 health Bantha Rider, and then deal 3 damage to Onar, bringing him down to 4 health. Our next rules mistake comes at the start of the round during command card play, when Zach tries to play Take Initiative even though he already has initiative. The players forget that there is a rule in 4-player Skirmish that the player that has the initiative token is not allowed to play Take Initiative, and again, we just chalk this up to inexperience with the format and move on. Tom also plays Take Initiative for the round. Zach activates Onar and uses Rush to deal the last point of damage to R2, remembering to use Jabba's Nefarious Gains for 1 extra victory point. Onar then attacks 3PO and defeats him, gaining another 2 victory points, plus 1 for Nefarious Gains. The players then realized how often they've been forgetting to apply Nefarious Gains and attempt to apply it retroactively. Note, you don't really want to try and do this in a tournament setting because, as you'll see here, Zach and Todd also forgot to use Nefarious Gains, but they remembered it a couple times as well, so it's going to be very difficult for them to go back and figure out where they forgot to use it and how many points they should have gotten. So really, once you've kind of moved past that, it's really dangerous to try and apply points this way retroactively in bulk. You're going to end up making mistakes, and it could really affect the outcome. And by the rules, you know, once you've kind of missed an opportunity that's passed, it's passed, so. But luckily, we get to keep track of the victory points for them, so it's not going to be an issue here. At this point, I'll just be showing the scores as if all the players and teams had been using Nefarious Games at every opportunity that they should have. So now you'll just see 1 score for each team. Tom activates his only remaining figure on the board, IG-88, moving him 3 spaces out of cover to attack Zach's now exposed Onar. Using a pool of red and green dice, Tom plays Deadeye to apply +2 accuracy to the attack in addition to IG's automatic +2 accuracy, dealing 6 damage to Onar and defeating him and scoring 7 points with Nefarious. IG then moves 4 spaces back into cover, but away from the terminal this time. Zach activates again for his normal activation, moving BT 4 spaces and attacking Matt's hired gun on the turrets at range 4. The hired gun is defeated, giving up 3 victory points with Nefarious, and attacks Zach's Jawa with Parting Shot, but deals no damage. Matt moves Sabine 3 spaces and attacks BT at range 5, dealing 4 damage and 1 damage to the Jawa with Blast. Matt then plays Rebel Graffiti to gain 2 victory points, although he realizes he wants to use Parting Gift first, but deals 0 damage. Todd's Shyla uses Whip to pull Sabine adjacent to her, dealing 3 damage with her attack and leaving her at 8 health. Since Tom has no remaining activations, Zach activates his IG-88, moving him 7 spaces to attack Sabine with 2 red dice. Matt chooses to mill for the strain from Relentless, and Sabine takes 4 damage from the attack, bringing her down to 4 health. After that, Zach and Todd decide there's no way for them to catch up on points this round, and they concede a well-fought game.